familiar sign at RAF stations throughout the country, but this airfield has a dual role. September and the final race meeting of the year at RAF Rufforth. It's Friday afternoon, and within minutes of the Air Force vacating the station, members of the British Racing and Sports Car Club are at work transforming the huge airfield into a motor racing circuit. Tomorrow, Ted Tate will be clerk of the course, but today he's having a thumping great time. And Chief Flag Marshal Frank Holmes gets on with the job. With stakes every 20 feet, a mile of rope barrier goes up. The Encore erectors are busy with over 1,000 yards of motorway barrier. Half a dozen essential tents appear. Out on the circuit, corner signs and marshal's points are built under the watchful eye of Centre Chairman Frank Wright. The hard-worked trailer and the chairman's Jaguar are pressed into service again as loads of fencing are prepared for the paddock. Many hands do indeed make light work, and already Royal Air Force Rufforth is taking on a new identity as Britain's only temporary racing circuit. As the evening draws on, work speeds up as the circuit is almost completed, and thoughts turn to the free refreshments at the local village pub. The Jervis Patrick, which is a powerful test you get working out there, to be sure. And it's time to relax and talk about tomorrow's racing at Rufforth. Saturday morning dawns bright and sunny. Perfect conditions for racing and the flying display later in the day. Frank Lamming and Roger Spence are sound recorders for the day. Some unkind people said John Holroyd's Lotus was parked in the perfect spot, and practice had its drama when Tony Tate's Mini hit the barriers head-on. After practice, our camera team had a drop of lunch, as did Emily Wright in the paddock office, and our commentators, Frank Kay and Johnny Hyam. It was good to see Jeff and Maisie Knights again, after a long absence. And then it was time for Event 1, the Clubman's Race, with Mervyn Bartram in a Chevron and David Ragg in a Lotus 7, taking on poleman Tim Goss in the one and only Lotus 37. At the start, it was David Ragg and Tim Goss side by side, but at boundary, Tim Goss went into a lead he held throughout. The timekeepers were busy clocking Tim Goss at well below the lap record, which he eventually left at 1 minute 21 seconds, 75 miles an hour. The first flying event was aerobatics by a team of jet provos, and the crowd was treated to a great display of close formation flying. Big John Fletcher arrived in his Formula Ford Merlin for the single-seater event, which looked a certainty for poleman John Scott Davis in his Formula One Cooper. But Scotty did his usual spin at the S's on lap 1, and nobody could catch Dick Barker, who won by a mile in his Formula Ford Alexis. Dick Barker was the man of the day, winning no fewer than 3 races, in spite of his unorthodox style. As fresh supplies arrived at race control, and Shirley Wood and Johnny Hyam conferred, a noise like thunder heralded the arrival of a Lightning jet fighter. And today marked the final appearance of Northern Saloon champion Harry Ratcliffe, who is retiring from racing. Brian Robinson was on pole position with his Cortina. Next up was Chris Benter and his Escort, and Harry Ratcliffe completed the front row in his 1-litre Vita Min. As the cars waited to leave the paddock, a Whirlwind helicopter was demonstrating rescue techniques. The only lady driver in the race was waiting patiently as a signal was given to leave for the start. It was Brian Robinson who shot into an early lead, which he increased remarkably at the S's from Chris Benter and Harry Ratcliffe. On lap 2, it was still Robinson, with Venter challenging Ratcliffe hard. But it was not Robinson's day, as gearbox trouble put him out, and Harry Ratcliffe eventually finished second, to the very quick escort of Chris Venter. And so it's time to leave Rufforth to the Air Force for another year. Over in the Leeds office of the BRSCC, Secretary Shirley Wood is already hard at work preparing for the next meeting at Cadwell Park. The late September sun bathes the beautiful old market town of Louth in Lincolnshire, little changed in over 300 years. It's a typical Saturday afternoon, yet only 5 miles away, in the heart of the countryside, the scene is set for a very modern event indeed. The first international motor race meeting at Cadwell Park. Formula 3 drivers from 14 different countries have been arriving all morning for this premier event in the motor racing calendar. Much interest was shown in the brand new March and its Swedish driver, Ronnie Peterson. And in the paddock office, competitors were greeted by club stalwarts, and the event had attracted some of the best teams of cars and drivers in the world. But then it was time for practice, as Bill Brown gave the signal to go, and Constable Jim Fleming on point duty said stop. The drivers wondered what was in the air, but as they reached the mountain, they found the answer. Few of the drivers had seen the circuit before, and a full hour's practice on the Saturday gave everyone a chance to learn this mini Nürburgring before official timing began on the Sunday. Looking like moon men, Peterson and Schenken discussed tactics. The Cadwell track really suits Formula 3 cars, and drivers were finding the limit by spinning off all over the place. And everybody spun at the mountain at least once. Sunday was an almost perfect autumn day, and with fierce competition on the most exciting and exacting circuit in the country, what could be better? Ted Tate had a large audience for his driver's briefing.
I know a lot of you haven't been before. I hope you'll enjoy it here, and I hope you all come back again.
First cars out were the Saloons, and John Hine in Duncan Hamilton's escort was the early leader from Barry Pearson and Mike Crabtree's Willman's car, and Nick Ford's Porsche was well up. Driving off the road as much as on it, Barry Pearson soon passed John Hine, and the orange and blue Melton Racing escort was in the lead he was to keep. Mike Crabtree dropped out of third place with fuel starvation troubles, and John Hine's challenge faded when he pulled off with a broken half shaft. The Porsche eventually took second place by a whisker from the escorts of Mansfield and Fitzpatrick, and Barry Pearson was able to cruise home to the first of his 2 wins of the afternoon. Ronnie Peterson finds time for a last-minute chat with Rainer Wiesel. But the tension is mounting as 22 of the world's fastest Formula 3 drivers arrive on the packed grid. On the front row was Tim Schenken, Rainer Wiesel and Howden Ganley. As the seconds tick away, let's listen to the thoughts of the drivers as they wait for the flag.
I think the main opposition comes from many people. It's a little fast second.
You're just concentrating on the starter and the rev counter.
Just 125% luck and we have it. I think, I will miss one more of the start.
Tim Schenken had made the best start, and as they roared up Coppice and into Charlie's, it was Schenken, Wiesel, Hunt, Buechler, Lucas, Peterson, Ganley, Mazet, Jassot and Williams. At the mountain, the order was still the same, and nobody was taking any chances yet in this 25-lap final. As they leave Barn Corner with 1 lap completed, it's still Schenken, Wiesel, brilliant newcomer James Hunt and the pack. The old lap record of 1 minute 39.6, 81 miles an hour, had been shattered time and again in practice and the heats, and had even been broken on the standing lap of the final. It was eventually to drop no less than 6 seconds to 1 minute 33.2, nearly 87 miles an hour, and shared by Schenken, Wiesel and Hunt. The favourite passing manoeuvre was to slipstream down the straight, dive out under demon late braking. Doing just this on lap 3, Rainer Wiesel took Tim Schenken for the lead. Big L Lucas, James Hunt and Howden Ganley, who after a shocking start had recovered well to 5th place ahead of Ronnie Peterson in the mark. Wiesel was trying his utmost to pull away, but without success, for Schenken and Lucas were with him at every move. On the next lap, Schenken was pushed down to 3rd, as Big L made his bit at the end of the straight. But it was not to last, as Lucas had cooked his engine and Schenken was again in 2nd spot and challenging for the lead. Meanwhile, Howden Ganley had been pulling up well, and with Big L's retirement, the New Zealander was up to 3rd place. James Hunt was staggering everyone by keeping up and regularly passing Peterson, and the new march was certainly not hanging about. By lap 13, all Wiesel's advantage had been whittled away, and the flying Australian went back into the lead, and Peterson, ignoring his lack of clutch, again passed Hunt into 4th place for the umpteenth time. It was getting terribly slippery at the mountain, where constant clipping of the apex had thrown dirt onto the road, and Graham Goodman's Techno was one of many to spin out of the race at this point. There was nothing between the leading pair, and 2 of the 3 kings of Formula 3 were passing the lead backwards and forwards between themselves, while the 3rd was still in battle with Hunt for 4th place. Rayner led them into the mountain for the 21st time, failed to find 2nd gear, and spun his hard-earned lead away. Schenken and Ganley rushed by, and Wiesel resumed a furious 5th. At last it looked as though Schenken had it in the bag, but Ganley was still proving an unprecedented threat. With only a couple of laps to go, Wiesel had caught the Peterson-Hunt battle, but couldn't squeeze past either of them, and Hunt was finding the battle a little too hectic, and took to the grass at Mansfield on the penultimate lap. Wiesel had another go at Mountain, but Hunt firmly shut. On the final lap, there were no dramatics from Ganley, and the brand new Brabham ran to a first-time win by 4/10 of a second from the chevron. 16 seconds behind, Peterson had passed Hunt to take 3rd. One of the classic Formula 3 races of the year had proved to be a huge success, particularly with Tim Schenker, who thoroughly deserved his fine win. And we look forward to the next international at Cadwell Park.